Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Howard and I am Head of Supplier Relationship Management at Coventry Building Society. Coventry Building Society is a type of bank which is based in the UK, and as Head of Supplier Relationship Management, I'm delighted to speak on this topic of payment innovations, as it has such a huge impact on the motivation and the loyalty of some of our most important suppliers. Stephen, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Rebecca. So Stephen Carter, I work at Ivalua. I'm responsible for our payments and invoicing solutions, and I'm really looking at what the next wave of products can do for businesses, working with our customers and the market, really, to understand what's going on. And I've been in the industry for ever, pretty much. So it's really great to start to look at how we can improve procurement by really innovating around payments. So it's a great topic.
Fantastic. Stephen, how about we get started just with the first question of the panel to ensure the audience doesn't miss out at all?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah,
that's great.
So I think Michael's in the room somewhere, but I don't think he's joined us yet. So
okay, yeah. Okay. Well, hang on and see if he gets a chance. So one of the first questions I know that we were really keen to address was about why we called this session Closing the Loop. Why are payments often a forgotten part in the overall process? What's your view?
Well, I think, when we're looking at this conversation, I think payments has always been a taboo subject. Ultimately, it's one of these sort of the things that once payments moved from, if you like, finance into ERP systems, it became a taboo subject. People didn't want to talk about payments, didn't want to change it. And what I've seen over the ages is that rather than looking at innovation in this area, it's been a black hole. It's basically been something no one ever touches. And it's a silo. And I think one of the keynotes earlier was talking about silos in transformation. And this is a classic silo area. And it's been forgotten about because people don't want to touch it. And I see organizations with sticky plasters on sticky plasters, with duplication check on, and it's just become an unmanageable beast. And it's time really that people recognize that actually payments is the thing that joins good procurement practices with suppliers, creates supplier relationships, strengthens the whole procurement process, introduces innovation, builds trust. So with a broken payments process, everything's gone, and it's time to relook at that assumption that it's an untouchable beast, and go, okay, let's transform it, let's turn it into something powerful.
Excellent. Yeah. Stephen, I really agree with you. Michael, we were just talking about why payments are often that forgotten part of the process. And I find as a practitioner in the organization, it's just as Stephen was describing, it's the silo approach. Often people who negotiate the deal don't then have to live with some of the post-contract issues. And often it's just not a target that procurement professionals or sales get focused on. And so we all know, you really manage what you measure, but we know when it's painful, everyone else suffers. What about for your view? Why do you think payments are sometimes forgotten?
To be honest with you, I missed the start of this, so I do apologize for the slight technical issue and getting joined in there. My background may well be slightly different to you guys. I run Finance Transformation UK, and my experience has all been doing transforming finance functions, but the majority of finance functions get transformed through accounts payable. And in my honest opinion, what happens is there's a massive amount of time invested in ensuring that the matching process works. So we can get an order to an invoice match and through to the stage where we want to pay it. But we're not actually paying enough attention to the payment part of the process. And all of this starts right from the beginning, just exactly as you said, Rebecca. If you don't have a good, firm starting block when you create a supplier relationship with a new supplier, it just goes right through the process. And it doesn't work. And it makes difficulty when we come to matching, and it creates difficulties in late payments. So myself and Ellen were having a chat there as part of her purchase to pay network about the fact that the UK obviously has a late payment culture. So the only way to tackle this is to ensure that the payment innovations that are out there drive companies getting paid on time, which is going to drive a better relationship for all.
And that's going to be the key, and obviously that's what we're talking about here today. And apologies for the technical hiccup, but I'm here now, and I don't know. I guess you've mostly covered the first question, guys. But here I am, and great to be here and to chat to everybody on the session today. But I think you're right, Michael. It's absolutely imperative to get that relationship right at the beginning. And I just caught the tail end of what you were saying there, Rebecca, for sure. So, I mean, to what extent do you think technology can drive innovations in this area? And I guess let me ask you first of all, Steve.
I think, yeah, I mean, basically, digital payments is innovation. I mean, we've looked at banking APIs and opening up the whole banking environment. And one of the things that strikes me is that, you know, as we say, payments is people's part of that relationship, and it actually starts at the sourcing event. When you create a sourcing event, you're creating a relationship with the supplier, you're agreeing the contract, and then that contract is how you're going to be paid. So it's a critical part of that process. And when we look at technology, particularly source-to-pay technology, a lot of investment into that process, and that really does bring new levels of security because it gives you a transparency across the whole journey with full reconciliation. But what the real power is, talk about late payment culture, is actually with digital technology within a secure source-to-pay environment, you can pay the supplier next day, within hours, in fact. So there's no 3-day wait while the payment clears in the system. You can pay the supplier almost instantly, and that opens up new doors to say, okay, if we can pay the supplier instantly on approval of invoice, well, we've got a few more days to manage our cash. But more importantly, I can look at innovation. Okay, can I pay on a part on order? Can I pay a part on delivery? Can I pay a part on invoice? Yeah, let's work innovation. Let's use that innovation in payments to drive better relationships, and so I see that all the time, and that's a powerful story.
And I guess it gives you that level of visibility that you're not going to be able to have anywhere near, particularly if we're talking about an end-to-end visibility across that space. What do you think, Rebecca? I mean, do you have you've been involved in lots of organisations over the past upwards of 20 years or so, and in fact, as have all of you, so there's a great lot of experience with all of you here on the panel today. I mean, do you see there's a heavy need for technology in this area that people perhaps aren't aware of?
I think fully. I agree with Stephen's point about those opportunities to pay suppliers at a much faster time pace. As a reward, I think traditionally as procurement professionals, we've got used to now the idea of performance-based payment, and that how suppliers' historic performance may affect payment in terms of the quantity and the speed of payment. I think what I'm finding now is that suppliers' contribution to innovation is so much more valuable as a means of motivating suppliers. Performance is something historic, and all of us have been in those sessions with suppliers hashing over some event that happened on a particular day. What we really should be focused on is how that supplier's contribution to innovation for the future then will help the organization in all of its key metrics that it's looking for. And so if we can encourage faster payments for those suppliers who have the largest influence and impact on innovation and who are contributing the most, I think we really secure loyalty from our key suppliers.
And that's the key, isn't it? You know, if you can get that loyalty and trust from them between you as a partnership, then that can work wonders in terms of innovation. And Michael, you talked briefly there a little bit about compliance and regulatory issues. How far do you think that businesses are going to be led by compliance and those kind of issues in the years and months going forward?
Well, I think the approach has been over the last couple of years. Obviously, we have the prompt payment code, which companies can sign up to, and it's not compulsory. They can join up to it and set the right example. I've joined it myself in order to set the right example. And I do ask my own clients, have they signed up to it? In addition to that, you have the payment reporting requirements, which come in twice a year, whereby you're expected to report upon how effectively you've paid your suppliers over 30, 60, 90 days, etc., and to terms. And I actually do believe that the regulatory side has a role to play in driving the fact that small businesses in particular get paid on time. So there's a little bit of, I guess, which suppliers drive your innovation. Yeah, they'll differ from company to company. And then there's which suppliers are actually a small business and they need the cash flow to keep going so that they're still there next year, so that they can still service you, and you never know that maybe one of the innovations is going to come out of them. So I'm in fact, at this stage, I'm firmly of the view that more, I would actually go for more regulation to ensure that the smaller companies are paid on time. And what I like, one of the points that Steve made just at the start there when this question was going around, there's an entire plethora of new technology out there in the payment space, which means basically I can pick up the phone and pay somebody just like that. So there's a lot of that. And what I find is that this technology is moving at a faster pace than most large corporates can keep up with. And there's a little piece where there needs to be almost an education of all the options that are out there, what they mean. And indeed, in such an era of cyber security, how secure they are, so people feel comfortable to use them, then everybody gets paid faster, the relationship continues to work. So that's, for me, is where the innovation is.
Absolutely. And would you agree with that, Rebecca? Because I guess we're talking about elements of risk that we want to avoid within our supply chain as well. And I guess perhaps working with the suppliers is another way to counteract that and make sure that we're helping them and in turn help us. I mean, so what are your thoughts on that, on compliance and sort of regulation driving things?
No, Ellen, you're so right. I mean, this relationship aspect sometimes is seen as a bit of a counter to third-party risk management. And for any of us who work in regulated industries, I'm within financial services. So for us, there are new rules next year from the Prudential Regulation Authority that will mean a change in our whole governance and risk management process across the supply base. For me, I'm with Michael. I see this as a good thing, actually supports good governance, regular discussion with suppliers as a reward, and particularly, as Michael says, to recognize small businesses where cash flow is so important. You know, for us in the society where we believe in prompt payment to the agreed terms across the entire supply base, but in particular to ensure that those smaller businesses, and for us, many of those are local businesses as well, really get that support, and they shouldn't feel as if the regulation is a barrier in any way. Quite the opposite. It is an enabler for good risk management.
Yeah,
absolutely. And what would you say, Stephen?
Well, I think undoubtedly, compliance and regulations are really critical to this, and I agree with everybody. Both Michael and Rebecca have said. I live in France, by the way. So in France, you face penalties if you pay late. Large organisations get fines for paying suppliers late. So that regulatory compliance is really critical. But it also shouldn't be seen as a barrier to change, because actually now we have, when you look at the source to pay process, you have the opportunity to actually have that embedded into the process. So it becomes more automated. It's more there. It's more omnipresent. It's always there, if you like. So regulations and compliance are a key part of it, but they shouldn't be seen as the barrier or the things to stop change. And I think that's sometimes what I see is, we've got these regulations, we can't change anything because it's...
Perhaps it's the word itself, Steve. The word regulation. We don't like to hear compliance. We don't like to hear regulation. we like to think that we can do things, as we choose to do. But then perhaps, like you were saying, Michael, it is then about education or talking to people about, actually, these are things to help you as a business and to help your suppliers with the innovations that you want to survive, want and need to be able to grow your business. And how important do you feel, Rebecca, that the buy-in of a senior management team is in making sure that these things actually happen in terms of the technology that you might use, and in aligning with regulation and compliance issues and paying promptly on time?
Ellen, completely. And I think for senior management, there's so many angles that we can approach things, whether it's about the whole digital agenda, ensuring that we secure the right funding and the right workflows to break down that silo approach that Stephen mentioned in the beginning. And for me, I think the number one hook on this topic for senior management is around sustainability. When we're talking about our ESG goals, this element of prompt payment, supporting smaller businesses, bettering engagement, from my perspective, with suppliers who are part of underrepresented groups. Payment is fundamental in all of those cases, and having the good governance to ensure that we do, encourage our senior managers to see that payment is a sustainability issue, and we can hit that target very strongly if we get the right technology in place to enable prompt payment.
Yes, and it can make all the difference, as you say. I mean, what do you think, Michael? I mean, you've worked with many teams with transforming them from perhaps a more manual way of working into a more end-to-end visibility.
I think what Rebecca.
Do you think it's?
Sorry, I think what Rebecca picked up on is actually spot on. The ESG reporting requirements, it actually needs to be built into that. So on a regular basis, when I take on a client, I tear apart their annual report. And I have, in the course of the last couple of months, seen some absolutely fantastic ones. And it's carbon, it's the environment, it's all the green issue. The guys are all over this. But the economy is run by the 6.5 million small businesses that exist within it. So I think at the very least, a page, if not a headline, should be devoted to the fact, do we or don't we pay these guys on time? And I don't think that that's onerous. I hear the arguments over and over again, and I've transformed many large-scale teams. The data is there. The data can be extracted. Companies can be identified by 2 or 3 key metrics, the same as Companies House uses themselves, to identify whether you're a small business or not. It is not. It's
about having the will, then, perhaps, to do it, isn't it? And
that's exactly. And the only way that the feedback loop works so that the will is there is that there is some compliance regulatory need to do it.
Absolutely,
so we're all over
work together with it.
Exactly.
No, I agree, and it sounds like we're all in agreement on that to some extent. I mean, I know, Steve, you're saying that sometimes it can be a barrier, but I think that goes back to some of the things we've just been talking about making sure that people understand the reasons why, and perhaps anybody, people who are on the session today, perhaps it's worthwhile talking about some success stories that you've heard of, been a part of. Rebecca, I mean, you've worked with a lot of teams around this issue in supplier relationship management. Can you think of some of your best stories to tell, some success stories where it's worked particularly well for you and the team?
I can, yeah. So even, for example, a contract that I'm working on at the moment is with a technology organization called Mosaic. So they're providing strategy and consulting to us around modernizing our IT, around change and the digital space to ensure we get better productivity and agility. Now, this is just one firm where we've agreed a form of payment where there is an agreed payment date following completion of a project, and then part of the sum that we've agreed to pay is retained, and only upon successful completion of deliverables is then the payment released, and normally that is within a set period of time. And I think what we found interestingly is that it's a sort of model that initially would seem to drive some concern amongst suppliers, but actually suppliers have really been very enthusiastic about this model, because what they find is that it drives our internal technology teams to be very disciplined in terms of how they're setting the deliverables, how they're forming acceptance criteria. Getting those requirements right at the early stage is in the advantage of our suppliers. It benefits them, and getting that robust discipline there in the first instance means that suppliers get paid on time, and actually when that final reward appears, it then demonstrates that it's been a really quality assignment for the supplier, which can then help them sell on. Now, obviously, we need the technology to be right to support that sort of nature of payment, whether we're paying in stages, whether some of the payment is shorter than the traditional payment terms. But we find actually payment needs to have mutual advantage on the buy side and the sell side, and not be used as a stick to beat suppliers, but something to motivate them.
Absolutely, that's a great story, Rebecca, because you're right. It absolutely has to be something in it for both parties. Like in any relationship, for it to work, it has to work for everybody. And perhaps also it's something when you've got those things in place, it means that the whole of the organisation is adhering to what it needs to in terms of growth, and it's sustainable. Michael, do you have any stories to share on this? Any success stories, hopefully?
Well, I'll tell you what my approach to this has been. I can give you loads of success stories about teams that are being transformed and the purchase to pay process becoming slicker and all the rest of it. But I've actually sort of slightly changed my focus in the course of the last year. And what I've found is I've always concentrated on the people and organizational change piece and making it happen and making it live. But I've started to investigate what are all the solutions that are out there that can actually make the process slicker, faster, and everybody get paid. And that for me has actually been the interesting thing. But what I'm finding is I'm having to investigate this myself, and I'm kind of looking for almost a one-stop shop, which explains to me these are the latest developments in the payment space. These are where they're applicable, and where they're most applicable for my particular type of clients, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the whole payment innovations themselves is fascinating, and I'm still learning about it. And what I actually think will come out of the course of the next year, because I've been introducing some of these to some of my own clients, is that I will end up with success stories that are completely different to the success stories I had before. It won't be about streamlining the process, headcount, all in the AP invoice matching space. It'll be, what did we actually do at the end? Right in the payment space there. And then that's the part that I've found most interesting. So we'll have this conversation again at DPW 2022.
But do you know what? But I always think it's really important to start anything with why. There's no point going through a process unless you know where you want to lead in the end. But it so often happens that people, in the course of the change management that they should put in place, they don't think about the outcomes at the end, unfortunately. You know, and I think we all know, we've talked about success. So perhaps it's worth talking a little bit about what might happen if things don't go to plan, if you don't look at these things in the way that you should. I guess where the starting point of that might be in terms of reputations. What do you think could happen? Because of course, some people on the presentation today may be just starting to think about this and at the start of their process. But I think it's worth thinking, yes, outcomes. But I think it's also worth thinking, do you know what? If we don't do anything, what's the worst can happen? Rebecca?
Agreed. It's so many things, as you said, reputation-wise, in terms of that ESG reporting, those terrible metrics which are really visible externally to suppliers who we're trying to market ourselves towards. And you know, one of the things we measure as an organization is whether we are a customer of choice to our suppliers. And it's so important that, you know, that perception is there to really boost the right kinds of relationships. And I also think actually for candidates, you know, through the recruitment process to the organization, they want to know they're working for a purpose-driven organization, especially I find for our millennial candidates, for whom that is so important in their decision making. So I think it's not just suppliers we can be turning off, it's actual talent as well.
Absolutely, and I think Michael, perhaps you'd probably agree with that. You know, going back to what you've just said just now, that really you have to think about the people in the organisation, and sometimes they are the people who get left behind because you're too focused on technology, too focused on process. What do you think, Michael? It sounds like you're changing your focus a little bit.
Well, I fully agree with Rebecca's point with regards to talent. I think the millennial generation that are out there are looking at companies to be socially responsible on so many different fronts, and to give them a reason for living, if you like, with regards to signing up to the purpose of the company. So I think that's important. I think I'd say most of the companies that I work with, the process still comes down to one or two key people in the chain that keep the process ticking over, okay? And I think we had this conversation on another session a couple of weeks back. I think one of the things coming out of the pandemic, which is very, very important as far as I'm concerned, is everybody went to go work at home. Now, there's a whole issue around making sure that you got them all back into the office from a work and personal perspective, but you also need to go check that your process wasn't actually breached during that period of time in which everybody worked in 100 different houses rather than in the desks in front of you. So there's a piece here where every CFO and indeed every CPO has an opportunity and indeed a responsibility to make sure if we have another pandemic next year, God forbid, hope we don't, but let's say we're locked down for another 6 months. Are we still going to be reliant on one person to go into the office to make the process work, to make sure the suppliers get paid, to crack? I think we have a responsibility at the executive C-suite level to go, no, we're not. We got a massive wake-up call. Let's take the wake-up call. It's not just about attracting the next wave of talent to come and work for us. It's about making sure that the people we have, we're in essence not abusing them.
Absolutely, and I do think there's some great work being done on that over the course of the last sort of 18 months or so. Steve, in the last minute, it seems to have gone very, very quickly.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? Obviously, the people are key to an organisation. Where do you think it sits? Sort of culture, people, or technology?
I think it's all three, and I think I'm going to quickly summarise, a conversation I've had with a prospect, which is that they were talking about their challenges and what they were doing in the market, and they basically told me that over the past few years they've taught their suppliers they're a bad customer, and now they're at the back of that queue. And it summarises everything that both Michael and Rebecca said, and that's because of the payment process, because they just taught their suppliers that we're a bad customer. Actually, we've promised you all the stuff up front, and we're still paying you late. That has to change, and ultimately, that is reputational damage, because those suppliers could be customers of that organisation.
Absolutely.
Yeah? And that's got to be remembered. It's a secular world now. We're all customers, and we're all employees, and we're all suppliers ultimately.
Absolutely.
That's key.
And yes, absolutely. To keep that in mind, that when you're talking about end-to-end connectivity, it really is a global thing now, isn't it? Yeah. And we're all very, very visible in what we do. So, well, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, Rebecca, Michael, and Steve. It's been great to speak to you again today, and I hope everybody's enjoyed the session. And good luck, everybody, for the rest of DPW. Take care now.
Thanks.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.